Avatar relationships are not good, but let me tell you something. Hot take. Avatar The Last Airbender would have benefited massively from a proper love triangle plot.
What?
Listen, okay? The Last Airbender ships are actually not that bad, okay? Trust me. You know why? Because I'm a Naruto fan, okay? That is bad. Avatar is just aggressively mediocre, slightly disappointing. However, the main thing the pairings suffer from is how sterile they are. They're lacking in drama and intrigue. So before we get to the love triangle idea, we're gonna roast the canon ships, try to improve them somewhat, and also examine a few popular non-canon ones in service of my hot take. Let's get into this. Not great, not terrible, generally inoffensive. The poster child of mediocrity, the cheese pizza of Avatar ships. It's okay not to like it, but if you actively hate it, I have to ask you, do you even like Avatar? Cringe romance is literally a core aspect of the Avatar brand at this point. It'd be kind of like hating cheese pizza but liking pepperoni pizza. 90% of pepperoni pizza is cheese pizza. Anyway, this one was pretty set in stone from the get-go, and only the craziest of plot twists would have had them pass on each other. The weirdest aspect of this ship is actually the overly maternal tack that their dynamic has in the first book. Katara bounces back and forth between being Aang's surrogate mother and his lover, and it feels really weird looking back on this dynamic as an adult now. Freud would have a field day with this shit, bro. In order to improve it, I think they should have made Aang the same age as Katara to reduce the impact of their maternally coded interactions and to lean more into the awkward teen romance angle. Then, I'd personally let the slow burn play out over seasons 1 and 2, and then finally lock it in the finale of book 2 when Azula nearly kills Aang. Katara would realize just how much she loves him after he nearly dies, and she manages to save his life. She'd tell him that she wants to be with him as they begin their recovery between books 2 and 3. That way, the stress of the Fire Nation invasion can test the stability and communication of their newly blossomed relationship, and book 3 can be about them learning to navigate each other's flaws. Even in the canonical version, there's plenty of emotionally intimate moments, and they lean on each other when they fall, and in my book, that gives it enough positives for me not to hate it. But as I said before, I don't love it either. There was enough here for me to buy it narratively, but its main guy, main girl get together at the end shtick has been done better in countless other stories. The overly slow pacing and lack of chemistry is what holds it back, really. And that, my friends, is part of the reason ZuTara gained so much traction in the fandom back in the day. I saw the forums, bro. It was crazy. KatAang is too straightforward and methodical for its own good. So, 5 out of 10. Average. Which is why a well-written love triangle might have propelled this ship into the stratosphere. Okay, now it's time to ruffle some feathers. Oh boy. So this actually had incredible potential and quite literally had all the building blocks for something truly interesting. However, Zuko's character arc makes it fundamentally incompatible, and they'd have to work through it and spend a lot of time on it, especially because of his betrayal of Katara in Ba Sing Se. They would have needed to basically stop the story to repair that dynamic. On top of that, there are massive in-universe logistical issues that they'd face if they tried to make it work. Zuko is Fire Nation royalty, and Katara is just a Water Tribe chieftain's daughter. He'd be heavily pressured by his station to marry someone of the Fire Nation aristocracy, like Mai. You'd have to devote a lot of time to Katara and Zuko repairing their bond after his betrayal, and the betrayal kind of has to happen, or otherwise the ship loses its most interesting variable, the fact that they're on opposite sides of the conflict. If Zuko joins Team Avatar too early, the relationship immediately becomes generic because it loses a lot of its tension, which in turn elevates KatAang again and creates the dreaded love triangle scenario. With that in mind, remember that Zuko kind of has to betray them for the sake of his character arc, in which his relapse is a massive turning point for his character. So in book 3, they would have to spend a lot of screen time on them once Zuko joins the gang, time that a 3-season show just doesn't have. On a more positive note, they have a great yin-yang motif with their whole fire-water iconography, and enemies to lovers is always an interesting dynamic shift provided it's well done. Overall, 6 out of 10. Interesting, but with an unstable foundation. Its popularity is born mainly because of KatAang's lack of chemistry, not because it's particularly good. But you'd also have to radically alter the story to make it happen, potentially needing a 4th season to tie it all together. Now then, remember my hot take? Well, we're going to come back to these 2 pairings for the last section of the video. However, first we're going to cover the other pairings before we circle back to the good shit. Below average, but not what I'd call bad. It's mainly a plot device to give Zuko a close ally in the Fire Nation that he can actually talk to, but also to officially sync ZuTara from a narrative/storycraft standpoint. It's basically carried by its role as a sounding board for Zuko to express his frustrations with his current situation, and his regrets for betraying Iroh, still not really being in his dad's good graces, betraying the Avatar. Strangely enough, Mei's characterization actually benefits from this dynamic for being Zuko's pseudo-therapist, which is ironic in that when a character is simply there to serve as an emotional sponge for someone else, they tend to turn into cardboard more often than not. However, the writing team actually did their diligence and used this opportunity to make Mei a much better character. Her characterization is boosted by way of being in love with Zuko, because their relationship adds a new, more emotionally present facet to her otherwise one-note emo girl motif. Improving this would be really easy. You don't have to change a damn thing almost. You just add 2, maybe 3 extra flashbacks of Zuko's childhood memories with Mei during book 2 when he's in Ba Sing Se. And what you do is you split the perspective to show them thinking about each other. One flashback would be from Mei's perspective, while some others would be from Zuko's. And this would serve as part of the buildup to his betrayal of Team Avatar and his uncle Iroh. His main motivator to do that could be brought about by his feelings for Mei. When Azula finds Zuko in Ba Sing Se, she could subtly threaten Mei's life as leverage to get Zuko to side with her when the time comes. So, as a result, he decides to betray Team Avatar to protect Mei from Azula. But that's how I would improve it. Overall, 4 out of 10, but with 7 out of 10 moments. It gets shelved in the back half of season 3, then thrown a few crumbs after Zuko finishes his arc. It's lacking in build-up and follow-through, so that's why it gets so many points deducted. But again, it's not bad in the traditional sense of the word, more weak, I would say. So this one's big on the what if, in that she'd have been a very interesting addition to the cast had Zuko decided to take Team Avatar's side in season 2 and stay in Ba Sing Se. They have the most chemistry out of all of Zuko's relationships, but in a way, it's like 2 ships passing in the night. It was meant to be an ephemeral connection to show that Zuko was changing, living in Ba Sing Se as lead. It makes for some interesting drama if you also tie it in with, say, ZuTara, for example, and build a love triangle off of it. However, the only way to effectively do this would be to make Zuko the main character of Avatar, which makes no sense without a massive restructure of the story at large, and again, to bring Jin into the cast as one of the main characters. I can't really even give it a rating because Jin only appeared in 1 episode for like 5 minutes, so rating not applicable, but with an asterisk. I actually like this one. It's generally pretty well done, and I think that's because it's a side couple. It doesn't take up a lot of narrative space, and each major inflection point in the relationship has enough time to breathe to where it doesn't feel overly drawn out like KatAang does, but it also doesn't just pop up out of nowhere like some other relationships do, like MaiKo. Also, they're really good at communicating with each other, any issues they have in the show are quickly processed and discussed, so bonus points there for them using their words. SoKki is the catalyst for Sokka's character arc in that she's the reason he abandons his sexist beliefs, and also serves as one of the capstones to that very arc because she helps him finally process his guilt over Yue's death and his fear of losing people he loves. It's strangely the best written ship in Last Airbender, and that's hilariously on brand in that it's got very little screen time, relatively speaking. Kind of like how Korra's best ship is Korrasami, and that's just because its non-existent writing lets you fill in all the blanks with better ideas than what the writing team would have come up with. So, 7 out of 10. Now that I think about it, since it's the best ship in Airbender, it says a lot about the romantic arc writing. I hope Sokka and SoKki lived a good life since their fates are kind of left unsaid, so it'd really suck for the writers to come in and torpedo it later down the line for some cheap shock value. So first order of business, we got to give Sokka his flowers. He has weapons grade Riz. But overall, out of these two, the main one I'm most curious about is Tokka, on the grounds that one of Toph's daughters had a big bout of speculation concerning who her father was, given that her skin is visibly darker than the other kids. The writing in Avatar isn't saucy enough to actually pull off Toph home-wrecking Sokka and SoKki or whoever he chose to marry. And also, Toph is like 12 in the original series, so realistically, this whole thing would have to go down sometime between Airbender and Korra. At the earliest, 5 years after the end of Book 3, absolute earliest. It's really interesting to think about on the grounds that the interpersonal drama is really, really good potentially, but it's little more than a minor curiosity. It feels weird giving it a rating at all on the grounds that Toph having a thing for Sokka is just more of a running joke than anything else. So 5 out of 10 with an asterisk for potentially great drama. Sokka is actually the person Toph is the least antagonistic with. He's usually the one that lets her hold on to him when they ride Appa, so there are some crumbs there, but in the end, this is more of a fandom curiosity. The same goes for Ty Lee and Sokka as well. It was just a funny dynamic that was used for gags and is carried entirely by fandom culture. Sokka enjoys the attention from Ty Lee more than he actually enjoys Ty Lee the person, which honestly is a mood. 4 out of 10 on the grounds that it's even less plausible than Tokka since they're on opposite sides of the conflict for the vast majority of the story. It's just not taken seriously enough by the narrative for me to give it much more than cursory thought. But they'd have a fun dynamic though. Bubbly girl, smart cynical guy, there's potential there for comedy gold. I see what the fans of this are latching on to. Okay, we're starting to get into the good juicy shit. You ready? Alright. Love triangle bullshit. Here we go. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with my channel, I like to dig into speculative alternate continuity ideas. And since I'm a writer and an artist, I can bring some of these ideas to life. So I kind of had an idea that I wanted to explore here. So let's move to the last couple I want to talk about. Oh yeah, I'm being serious right now. Hear me out. I fixate on this because of how amazing it'd be if the writing is on point. One of my favorite character dynamics is a romance that builds between two characters in which one of them doesn't really understand genuine affection, while the other one literally bleeds love and sunshine. I love Cloud and Aerith's dynamic, sue me. So here's a story scenario for you. Zuko, Aang, and Katara end up in a love triangle. Things heat up between all three of them in Ba Sing Se, with the flashpoint happening between Zuko and Katara in the cave. However, Zuko ends up choosing his family over Katara in that cave, and after returning home to the Fire Nation, he goes on to usurp Azula's place as Ozai's heir apparent. After which, I could see Azula joining Team Avatar out of revenge and also self-preservation, since Ozai doesn't need two heirs. Azula is now the spared, and he'd decide to get rid of her to remove any complications from the line of succession now that Zuko has quote-unquote proven himself. Zuko, of course, takes issue with this and decides to discreetly help Azula escape. As for Aang and Katara, the plotline about him mastering the Avatar state is still in this version of the story, so Here we're going to tie the Aang, Katara, Zuko love triangle premise into Aang's training with Guru Patik, where he has to let go of Katara in order to master the Avatar state. It's an opposite spin on the canon version where he chooses Katara over his Avatar state. In this case, he chooses duty. Perhaps because Katara's feelings for Zuko damage her relationship with Aang to a certain extent, and instead of trying to patch it up, Aang can't stomach being her second choice in the wake of Zuko's betrayal, and chooses to let her go as a response. It adds an element of tragedy to KatAang's narrative for some juicy emotional tension. The story could also go into a more mature tone and lean into one of the most important lessons of growing up, which is learning how to deal with failure and rejection. However, the success of this narrative twist leans heavily on the writing quality and how all the involved parties resolve the love triangle. As a result of Aang and Katara having a falling out, and Azula having nowhere else to be after leaving behind her ambitions for the throne, well, what else would she have to do aside from maybe looking for her mother with Aang and Zuko? In the aftermath of that story, having her stick with Aang and develop more as a person due to his newfound clarity and wisdom would be a really interesting story to watch play out. I'm not going to give this one a rating on the grounds that there's literally nothing in the story to suggest Aang and Azula as a potential thing, but I guarantee that it'd make for a really crazy alt continuity story that'd have some fun twists in Korra's era of the story. In this scenario, Katara ends up as consort of Fire Lord Zuko, and Aang and Azula spend their adulthood traveling the world together. Aang and Azula's kids, Gyatso, Bumi, and Ursa, would serve as really cool mentors for Korra later down the line. Also, crazy Grandma Azula would be an awesome character to have in Korra. Overall, it's an X out of 10. Its success rides entirely on its execution. Fun stuff. Maybe if this video does well, I'll take a stab at writing that story. If you want to see that, like the video and subscribe to my channel. I post updates on my post tab, and I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, kind of. Anyway, until then, I'll see you all next time, whenever that is.